The days after the breakup felt like I had stepped into an alternate reality, one where I was the villain in a story I hadn't written. Mutual friends stopped reaching out. Social media became a minefield of cryptic posts from Claire and her. Circle, quotes about finding yourself, escaping toxicity, and choosing happiness. I wasn't tagged, but I didn't have to be. The message was clear. One night, I got a text from an unknown number. "Hey, just thought you should know." It wasn't all her idea. My fingers tightened around my phone. "Who is this?" I typed back. Let's just say, not all her friends have the best intentions. Before I could reply, the number went dark. No response. No read receipt. Just silence. That was the moment I knew there was more to this story than Claire simply falling out of love. The message gnawed at me. Who had sent it? And what did they mean by it wasn't all her idea? That night, sleep was impossible. Every conversation, every distant look Claire had given me played back in my mind. Had I really lost her, or had someone taken her away? I needed answers. A friend in the shadows. The next day, I scrolled through my contacts, debating who I could still trust. Most of our mutual friends had picked a side, and it wasn't mine. But then I thought of her, Mia. She wasn't Claire's closest friend, but she had always been around. Unlike the others, she had never given me those judgmental looks. If anyone knew what had happened behind the scenes, it would be her. I hesitated before calling, half expecting her to ignore me. But after a few rings, she picked up. "Hello?" Her voice was cautious. "Mia, it's me. Look, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I need to talk to you." A pause. Then a quiet sigh. "I was wondering when you'd call." That sent a chill down my spine. "You know something, don't you?" Another pause. Then her voice dropped to a whisper. "Meet me in an hour. Coffee shop on 5th. But don't tell anyone." The truth begins to unravel. An hour later, I spotted Mia sitting in the corner of the cafe, nervously stirring her drink. When I sat down, across from her, she barely looked up. "You said you were wondering when I'd call," I began. "Why?" She exhaled slowly. "Because I've seen this happen before. You're not the first." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" She finally met my gaze. "Claire's friends have done this before. They pick someone their friend is dating, and slowly poison their mind against them. They call it helping, convincing her that she's in a toxic relationship, even when she isn't." I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. "Why would they do that?" Mia hesitated, glancing around before leaning in. "Because of Emily." The name sent a jolt through me. Emily had been Claire's best friend before we started dating. They were inseparable, until Emily suddenly stopped coming around. Claire had never given me a straight answer about what happened. "What does Emily have to do with this?" I pressed. Mia lowered her voice. "Emily was in love with Claire." The words hit me like a truck. She never told Claire outright, but it was obvious. When you came into the picture, Emily lost her chance. She tried to talk Claire out of dating you, but Claire wouldn't listen. Mia's fingers tightened around her cup. "So, Emily did what she does best. She turned everyone else against you. Slowly, carefully, until Claire started seeing you the way Emily wanted her to." I sat back, trying to process everything. "You're saying Emily manipulated Claire into breaking up with me?" Mia nodded. "She's done it before, and now she's done it again." A heavy silence settled between us. "What do I do?" I finally asked. Mia's expression was unreadable. "That depends. Do you want her back, or do you want revenge?" Mia's words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Did I want Claire back? After everything, after knowing she had been manipulated, did I still love her enough to fight for her, or was I too far gone, too bitter, too angry? I leaned forward. Tell me everything you know? Mia nodded, glancing around as if someone might be listening. Then, in a hushed voice, she began. The puppet master Emily had always been the center of Claire's world. Growing up together, they were practically sisters, until I came along. According to Mia, Emily had never openly opposed our relationship. Instead, she played a long game, planting doubts, twisting reality, dropping hints that I was controlling Claire, making her feel small. And when her words weren't enough, she enlisted the rest of the friend group. She's a master manipulator, Mia said, stirring her now cold coffee. She doesn't tell people what to think. She makes them feel like they came up with it themselves, and once she gets inside someone's head, they're done. I clenched my jaw. So Claire really believes I'm the bad guy. She does. Now, Mia said. But she didn't at first. That's why Emily had to push harder. I thought back to the changes, the distance, the way Claire started pulling away from me, spending more time with her friends. Emily had been behind it all. I exhaled sharply. I can't just let this go. Mia tilted her head. Then what are you going to do? The plan for the next 2 weeks, I did something I never thought I would. I played their game. I knew I couldn't just tell Claire the truth. She was too deep, too convinced. If I wanted her to see Emily's manipulation, I had to make her experience it. So I did the one thing Emily never expected. I apologized. At first, Claire was hesitant when I reached out, but I made it seem like I was reflecting, realizing my faults. I played the role they had cast me in, the remorseful ex who was trying to be better. And slowly, I got her talking again. I never brought up Emily, never blamed her. Instead, I let Claire come to me, and that's when the cracks started to show. One night, Claire called me. I could hear the hesitation in her voice. Do you think my friends are right about you? I stayed silent for a moment before answering carefully. I think you should decide that for yourself. She sighed. It's just, I don't know. Lately, I feel like they're deciding things for me. That was it. That was the opening I needed. The trap a week later, Claire invited me to talk in person. I could tell she was struggling, torn between what she'd been told and what she was, starting to feel. But I had one final card to play. I had recorded one of Emily's conversations. It wasn't hard. Emily had gotten cocky, comfortable. I managed to catch her admitting it all. How she had slowly turned Claire against me. How she had done it before, how she always knew what was best. And when I played it for Claire, I watched her entire world collapse. She went pale. Her breathing hitched. No, she whispered. No, she wouldn't do that. But the proof was there, undeniable. Tears welled in her eyes as realization sank in. Oh my God! The fallout Claire confronted Emily that night. From what I heard, it wasn't pretty. The friend group shattered. Some turned on Emily, others stayed loyal, but Claire? She was done. She showed up at my door the next day, eyes red, voice shaking. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I let her in. Let her explain. Let her cry. But as much as I had fought to save her from Emily's web, something had changed in me. I had won. But I didn't feel victorious, because now I had to ask myself, could I ever truly trust Claire again? Claire sat on my couch, her hands clenched together, eyes darting around like she was afraid the walls might judge her. I don't even know who I am anymore, she whispered. I let them get inside my head. I let Emily... Her voice caught, and she swallowed hard. I should have seen it. I folded my arms, leaning against the edge of the table, studying her. The woman sitting in front of me wasn't the same Claire I had fallen in love with. This version of her was shaken, uncertain, like a person waking up from a long, strange dream. Why didn't you trust me? My voice was quiet, but the weight of the question pressed between us. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. I don't know. At first, it was just little things. Emily would mention how possessive guys can be, and I'd brush it off. But then my other friends started saying it too. And when I'd try to defend you, they'd just look at me, like I was blind, like I was being stupid for not seeing it. She wiped at her face, and I believed them. I let them convince me that I was losing myself in this relationship, that I needed to break free to be happy. But I wasn't unhappy with you. I was just... She stopped, eyes meeting mine. They were unhappy, and they made me think it was my own feelings. Silence stretched between us. Finally, I sighed. So, what now? Claire bit her lip. I don't know, I don't want to lose you. She reached for my hand, but I didn't move. I had fought to bring her back. But now that she was here, I wasn't sure I wanted her anymore. The final choice for days, I wrestled with the question. Could I forgive her? Could I go back to the way things were, knowing how easily she had let others poison her against me? The Claire I had loved had trusted me, laughed with me, fought for me. But the Claire who had left me had crumbled under. Whispers and lies. And what if one day someone else planted a new idea in her head? Would she believe them over me again? Then I got another text. From the same unknown number. You got her back. Now don't be stupid. You know what you have to do. I stared at the message for a long time. And in that moment, I knew. Claire thought this was a story about us finding our way back to each other. But it wasn't. It was about me waking up. The last goodbye, I met her at the park where we had our first date. She smiled at me, hopeful. But I didn't smile back. I can't do this, Claire. Her face fell. What? But I thought I fought so hard to bring you back, I said quietly. But the truth is, I shouldn't have had to. Tears welled in her eyes. I made a mistake. I let them get to me, but I see it now. I'll never let it happen again. I shook my head. Maybe you believe that, but I don't know if I can. Her breath hitched. So that's it? I nodded. That's it. She stared at me for a long time, searching my face for something, anything, to change my mind. But I had already made my decision. Finally, she wiped her tears and stood. I really did love you. I nodded. I know. She walked away, and I let her. And for the first time in months, I felt free. A new beginning. In the days after I ended things with Claire, there was an eerie sense of peace. No more late-night doubts, no more trying to decipher the coded whispers of her friends, no more walking on eggshells. But there was something else, too. Something quieter, but just as real. Anger. Not the explosive kind. Not the kind that makes you want to scream or break things. This was a colder anger, a slow burn. The kind that settles deep in your bones when you realize how much you lost. Not just Claire, but time, trust, and the belief that love alone is enough. And yet, I wasn't done with this story. Not yet. Because Emily still walked away untouched, and that didn't sit right with me. The weak link Mia was the only person who had warned me. The only person in that friend group with a conscience, and I knew she had more to say. I met her at a bar, ordered 2 drinks, and slid one across the table. She raised an eyebrow. What's this for? For telling me the truth, I said. And because I need to know more. Mia sighed, rubbing her temples. I figured. She took a sip of her drink before giving me a wary look. What are you planning to do? I leaned in. Nothing reckless. I just want to make sure Emily never gets to do this again. Mia smirked. You really think you can beat her at her own game? I shrugged. She's not as untouchable as she thinks. Mia studied me for a moment, then exhaled. Fine. You want dirt on Emily? I'll give you dirt. And oh, did she deliver. The secrets beneath the surface Emily had skeletons, big ones. There was another guy before me, Nathan. He had been in the exact same situation, engaged to another one of Emily's friends. And just like with Claire, Emily had orchestrated their breakup, convinced the fiancé that Nathan was toxic. But this time, Emily had made a mistake. Nathan had receipts, screenshots, voice recordings, proof that Emily had deliberately played puppet master, twisting facts and manipulating emotions. And when Mia put me in touch with him, I knew exactly how this was going to end. Checkmate It started with an anonymous message to Emily's friends. Just a simple link to a Google Drive folder. No name, no explanation. Just cold, hard proof. Then a few strategically placed emails. To Claire, to some of Emily's other ex-friends, and to a few people I knew would love to gossip. And then, I waited. The fallout was glorious. Emily's empire of control collapsed overnight. Friends turned on her. People she had manipulated in the past came forward. The group chats that once whispered about me were now filled with accusations against her. And Claire, she texted me one last time. Claire, did you do this? I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, me. No. The truth did. I blocked her number after that, because I was finally done. The end, or something like it. Weeks passed. Then months. Emily faded into the background, her influence shattered. Claire disappeared from my life completely. And me? I moved forward, wiser, sharper, less willing to believe in fairy tales. But every once in a while, I'd think back to that first moment. The ring on Claire's finger, the shift in her eyes, and I'd remind myself of a hard truth. Love isn't just about finding the right person. It's about making sure they're strong enough to stand beside you without someone else pulling their strings. Time moved on, as it always does. I buried myself in work, in the gym, in anything that kept my mind from wandering back to Claire, Emily, and the tangled mess I had escaped. People say revenge is hollow, but watching Emily's empire crumble had felt damn satisfying. Still, satisfaction doesn't erase memories, and some nights when the world got too quiet, I'd find myself staring at the ceiling, wondering, did Claire ever really love me? Would she have realized the truth on her own if I had just waited? And did I do the right thing by walking away? I never reached out, never checked her social media, never asked Mia for updates. But life has a cruel sense of humor, and fate wasn't done with me yet. Because one night, months later, I saw her. Claire. A chance encounter. It was a random Friday evening. I was grabbing a drink at a rooftop bar with a few co-workers when I felt that feeling you get when someone is watching you, and then I saw her. Claire was across the room, standing near the bar, a glass of wine in her hand. Her hair was different, shorter, darker. She looked older. Not in a bad way, just in a way that said she had been through something. She saw me too. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then, hesitantly, she started walking toward me. I should have walked away. Should have turned back to my friends and ignored the past. But I didn't. The conversation we never had. Hey, she said softly. I nodded. Hey, she hesitated. Do you have a minute? I glanced at my drink, then at her. Yeah. We found a quiet corner of the rooftop, away from the music and the chatter. The city stretched out around us, lights flickering like stars. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, Claire admitted, gripping her glass tightly. But I needed to. I leaned back against the railing, studying her. Needed to say what? She took a deep breath. That you were right. About everything. I raised an eyebrow. Everything? She nodded, swallowing hard. Emily, the manipulation, How easily I let them turn me against you. I see it now. Really see it. And I hate myself for it. I exhaled slowly. Took you long enough. A sad smile tugged at her lips. Yeah, it did. She set her glass down and looked at me, searching, my face like she was hoping to find something there. I've been in therapy, trying to figure out why I let people control me so easily, why I trusted them over you. I didn't say anything. I just let her speak. I think deep down, I was scared. Scared of being in love, scared of losing myself. And they played on that fear. Emily made me think I had already lost who I was, and instead of questioning her, I believed it. I nodded slowly. So, what do you want from me, Claire? She hesitated. Closure. Maybe forgiveness. I let out a quiet laugh. Forgiveness? She winced. I know I don't deserve it, but I don't want you to hate me. I studied her, trying to figure out if this was another manipulation. But no. There was no Emily whispering in her ear this time. This was just Claire. Raw, vulnerable, owning her mistakes. And maybe that was enough. I took a slow sip of my drink, then set it down. I don't hate you, Claire. Relief flashed across her face. But I also don't trust you, I added. And I never will. She nodded, as if she had expected that. I understand. Silence stretched between us, filled with all the things we could never take back. Finally, Claire smiled, a real, sad, but genuine smile. I'm glad we talked, I nodded. Me too. And just like that, we said our final goodbye. This time, I knew it was truly over. Not with anger, not with resentment, just with the quiet understanding that some people are meant to be lessons, not lifetimes. As Claire walked away for the last time, something unexpected settled inside me. Peace. Not the kind that comes from winning, not the fleeting satisfaction of revenge. This was different. It was the quiet kind, the kind that comes when you finally understand that some doors are meant to close and you don't need to keep knocking. I finished my drink, watched the city lights flicker, and let go of whatever pieces of her still lingered in my chest. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The rebuild over. The next few months, life truly moved on. I dated, casually at first. I focused on my career. I traveled. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for another shoe to drop. Mia and I kept in touch, though less frequently. She had distanced herself from the wreckage of that old friend group, carving out a new space for herself, one where Emily had no power. Speaking of Emily, she never fully recovered. From what I heard, she tried to regain control, tried to spin a new story where she was the real victim. But people weren't buying it anymore. The damage had been done, and her influence had waned. And me? I wasn't thinking about any of them. Not anymore. Until, one day, a familiar name popped up in my inbox. An unexpected message. I was at work, sorting through emails when I saw it. A message from an unknown sender. No subject line. I hesitated before opening it, and when I did, my stomach clenched. I know what you did. You think this is over? It's not. Watch your back. No name, no signature. But I didn't need one. Emily. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smirk forming, so she wasn't done. Fine, neither was I. To be continued. Emily's message wasn't a threat. It was a promise. For months, I had moved on, believing she had finally faded into obscurity, buried under the weight of her own destruction. But some people don't know when to quit. And Emily? She had never been the type to go down without a fight. I sat there, staring at the email, debating my next move. Should I ignore it? Block her and pretend she didn't exist? Or should I dig deeper, find out what she was planning before she had the chance to strike? I already knew the answer. The investigation begins. I called Mia. She answered on the second ring, her voice cautious. I was wondering when you'd reach out. You knew? I asked, cutting straight to the point. She sighed. Not for sure, but I had a feeling. Emily's been quiet. Too quiet. After everything that happened, she just disappeared from social media, stopped talking to people, and when Emily disappears, it usually means she's planning something. That tracked. I exhaled. She sent me an email. No name, just a vague warning. But it's definitely her. Mia cursed under her breath. She's not over it. She hates losing and you made her look weak. I ran a hand through my hair. So, what's her next move? Mia hesitated. That depends. Are you seeing anyone? I frowned. Not seriously. That might be why she's waiting. She thrives on controlling relationships, on playing the long game. If she doesn't have an obvious weakness to exploit, she might be biding her time, looking for another way in. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. So this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Emily wasn't going to let this go, and if I wanted to stop her, I had to be 2 steps ahead, a dangerous game. The next few weeks, I kept my eyes open. Nothing. No. More emails. No whispers of Emily resurfacing. It was like she had vanished again. But then something strange happened. I was out with friends when I noticed a woman at the bar watching me. Not obviously, not in a way that would make most people suspicious. But I knew what to look for. She was listening, studying, and then she made her move. Hey, she said, sliding into the seat next to me with a warm smile. You look familiar. That was a lie. And I suddenly knew exactly what this was. Emily wasn't coming at me directly. She was sending someone else. The trap is set. I played along, smiled, charmed, got her name, Sophie. Asked casual questions, but kept my real answers vague, and after an hour, she finally slipped. You know, I think we have a mutual friend. Bingo. I leaned in, feigning curiosity. Oh, yeah? Who? She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Emily. And there it was. The confirmation I needed. Emily had sent her to test me, to gather information, maybe even to plant seeds of doubt, just like she had done to Claire. But this time, I saw it coming. And now, I had a chance to turn the tables. The war begins. I smiled at Sophie, raising my drink in a silent toast. She had no idea she had just walked into my trap. If Emily wanted to play games, I was ready. But this time, I wasn't just going to win. I was going to end her for good, to be continued. Sophie thought she was in control. She leaned in, eyes bright with faux curiosity, fingers tracing the rim of her glass like she was completely at ease. But I knew better. She wasn't just some random woman striking up a conversation. She was Emily's pawn, carefully placed to test the waters. And if Emily wanted to play chess, I was going to make sure she lost every piece on the board. I let Sophie think she was winning. Emily? I echoed, pretending to think. Oh, yeah. Haven't heard from her in a while. How's she doing? Sophie relaxed just a little. She's good. She mentioned you guys had history. Said things ended messy. Messy? That was an understatement. I chuckled, shaking my head. You could say that. But hey, what's life without a little chaos? Right? I made sure my tone was light, nonchalant, like I was just a guy reminiscing about an old flame. But inside, my mind was racing. Sophie wasn't just here for recon. She was gauging my reaction, testing how much of Emily's influence still lingered over me, so I gave her exactly what she wanted. I played the role of the clueless ex who had moved on. And the moment I saw her guard drop, I knew I had her. Flipping. The script over the next few days, Sophie and I continued to bump into each other. I let her think she was the one pushing things forward, dropping little breadcrumbs about my life. Only half-truths, just enough to keep her hooked. Then I flipped the game. I started asking about her. Not Emily. Her life. Her past. Her ambitions. First, she dodged the personal questions. But I was patient. I knew that if I played this right, she'd start slipping, and she did. One night, over drinks, she let something slip. She used to be different, you know. Sophie murmured, swirling, the wine in her glass. Emily. Oh? I prompted, feigning curiosity. Sophie sighed. Yeah, before all the drama. Before she started watching people like a hawk. She doesn't trust anyone anymore. I leaned forward. Not even you? That was the moment Sophie hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough. She wasn't just Emily's pawn. She was trapped in Emily's web, just like Claire had been, and that gave me an opening. Sowing doubt, people like Emily thrive on control, but control only works when everyone around them is loyal. Needed to shake Sophie's trust in Emily. So I started planting seeds. Subtle things. You ever wonder why she's so paranoid? I asked one night, after a few drinks. I mean, she sent you to keep tabs on me, right? But why? She already won. Sophie frowned. Did she? I shrugged. You tell me. She got what she wanted. Claire and I broke up. She got to rewrite the story. So why is she still checking in on me? Sophie was quiet for a long moment, and I knew right then that the doubt had started to creep in. The breaking point. The next time we met, Sophie was different, less sure, more hesitant. She doesn't tell me everything, she admitted, almost to herself. I thought we were close, but sometimes I think she just uses people. Bingo. I leaned back, watching the cracks form. This was how you dismantled a manipulator, not with confrontation, not with anger, but by turning their own people against them. And Emily? She was about to lose everything. To be continued. Sophie's admission was the crack in the dam I had been waiting for. Over the next few days, I kept up the pressure, nudging Sophie further into the territory of doubt. I shared just enough about how Emily had worked her way through my life, planting seeds of insecurity, playing with emotions, twisting truths. All of it was true, but not the whole truth. I didn't tell Sophie everything, not yet. I didn't need to. What I needed was for her to start seeing Emily for who she really was, a master manipulator, a person who thrived on control and fed on the chaos she created, and it worked. Sophie began distancing herself, small but telling signs. Texts went unanswered. Invitations went ignored. It didn't take long before she started questioning the friendship she had with Emily. I don't know if I want to be in the middle of this anymore, Sophie admitted one night sitting across from me. At a cafe, she had a faraway look in her eyes, a mix of uncertainty and frustration. I feel like I'm being played, but I don't know how to get out of it. I met her gaze, steady. You don't have to choose sides. Just look at the bigger picture. Who's really looking out for you? Sophie shifted uncomfortably. She had always prided herself on being loyal, but loyalty to Emily had started to feel like a trap. I've been thinking about it, Sophie said slowly, and maybe I've been blind. That was all I needed to hear. The next step was to get Sophie to confront Emily. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew Emily's power would break if Sophie stopped listening to her. If Sophie could confront her own doubts, she could pull the final thread that unraveled Emily's hold on everything. I texted Sophie later that night. You need to talk to her, but you have to do it on your own terms. Don't let her twist it. The reply came quicker than I expected. I'm scared, but I'll do it. And with that, the game was on. The confrontation, it was a quiet Saturday when I got the message. Sophie had finally confronted Emily. It didn't go well. Emily, ever the tactician, tried to flip the script, blaming everyone but herself. But Sophie was no longer the easy target. She had seen the cracks, and once they were visible, Emily couldn't hide them. "What's your deal, Emily?" Sophie had asked, the words trembling but defiant. "Why do you keep trying to control everything? I've been your puppet, but I'm not doing it anymore." Emily's response was a sharp, cold laugh. "You think I control people?" "No, Sophie, I protect them. I look out for you. You wouldn't be here if I hadn't guided you." But Sophie wasn't buying it anymore. "No, you've used me, just like you used Claire. You've ruined everything. It's not okay." And that was the moment Emily lost her grip. She exploded, revealing a side of herself Sophie had never seen before, angry, bitter, raw. "You think you know me? You think you can turn against me like everyone else? Fine, do what you want. But don't you dare think I'll ever forgive you." The line went dead. Sophie had hung up, and that was it. The web had unraveled. The last move Sophie texted me shortly after, her message simple and full of relief. "It's done." I knew what that meant. Emily's reign of control, her carefully curated facade, was crumbling. It was only a matter of time before the people around her started to realize what had been happening all along. The quiet manipulations, the petty gossip, the lies. And the best part? Emily was about to find out that the world wasn't just a stage for her to control. She had underestimated Sophie. She had underestimated me. And most importantly, she had underestimated the power of truth. The final blow came a week later when Emily reached out to me. It was a text. No words, just an image, a screenshot of a message between her and Claire. "I told you he was toxic. You just weren't ready to see it yet." I stared at the message for a long time. It was Emily, at her core, twisting the narrative, pretending. She had been the one who had warned Claire all along, but I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have words to say, but because Emily had finally shown her true hand. And now, I knew I didn't need to play her game anymore, so I deleted the message, and with that, Emily was officially irrelevant. The final chapter months passed. Sophie moved on with her life, stronger for having stepped out of Emily's shadow. Mia and I caught up occasionally, and we both agreed that we were done with the chaos. And me? I had learned something important, something I hadn't fully grasped before all of this. The real power doesn't come from controlling others. It doesn't come from manipulating relationships or trying to keep people in line. The real power is in choosing to walk away, in letting go of people who aren't good for you, in standing firm when everything around you is designed to shake your foundation. I still think about Claire sometimes. What might have been if things had turned out differently, but I also know that I made the right choice in the end. Time, as it often does, moved forward. It was funny how quickly the world could shift when you stopped holding on to the past. The pieces I had spent so long trying to force together, Claire, Emily, Sophie, slowly fell away, and in their place came something unexpected: peace. I woke up one morning to the soft hum of the city, the sun streaming through my window, and realized I hadn't thought about any of them for days. I hadn't thought about Emily's scheming, Claire's betrayal, or even the chaos that Sophie had gone through. I had simply moved on, and it felt good. A familiar face it was a quiet Tuesday when I ran into someone who, in another life, I might have never expected to see again. I was at a cafe working on a new project. The scent of freshly ground coffee filled the air as I typed away on my laptop, trying to get into a creative rhythm. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw her. Claire. She was standing by the counter, her back to me, talking to the barista. For a split second, I froze. Old memories rushed back like a flood. The good, the bad, the hurt. But then, as quickly as they came, they receded. I was over this. I had moved on. This was just a chance encounter. But Claire turned around, and when she saw me, her face softened. Her smile was hesitant, unsure. "Hey," she said softly, her voice almost like a whisper. I stood up slowly, gathering my thoughts before responding. "Hey." There was a moment of silence between us. The air felt thick, like we were standing on the edge of something, of past regrets, of memories we weren't quite ready to confront. Finally, Claire spoke again. "I didn't expect to see you here." I nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of my lips. "Neither did I." She took a step closer, then hesitated. I've been thinking a lot lately, about everything, about us." I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah?" "I was wrong," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I should have listened to you. I should have trusted you. I let Emily get in my head, and I hurt you. I hurt us." The words were exactly what I needed to hear, but at the same time, they were almost too little, too late. "I know," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But that was a long time ago, Claire. I've moved on." There was a long pause, and for a moment I saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the same look that had once drawn me in, that had made me believe in us. But now it was just another ghost. "I understand," she whispered, taking a step back. "I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I hope you find happiness, whatever that looks like for you." I smiled. "Thanks. I think I'm finally getting there." And with that, Claire walked away. A new chapter. It wasn't the grand reconciliation I once imagined. There was no emotional outburst, no tear-filled confessions. There was simply a moment of understanding between two people who had shared something, lost something, and ultimately learned to let it go. I sat back down at my table, the weight of the conversation settling into my bones. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even relieved. I was just free. The truth was, I had learned to value my own peace more than any past relationship. I had learned that moving on wasn't about erasing the past. It was about accepting it, understanding it, and finally stepping away from it. As I took a sip of my coffee, I realized something. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that, because I had learned to trust myself again. The real victory life was unpredictable. People came and went. Some stayed, some left. But what I realized in the end was that the only thing I truly had control over was how I chose to move forward. Emily's shadow had faded. Claire had apologized. Sophie had found her own path. And me? I had found mine. There was no dramatic end to this story. No explosive confrontation or earth-shattering revelation. Just the quiet, steady realization that sometimes the best way to move on was simply to let go. I smiled to myself as I closed my laptop and stood up from the table. Whatever came next, I was ready. The end, or perhaps a new beginning. It had been a few weeks since I ran into Claire at that cafe, and life had continued on its quiet, unpredictable course. I had fallen into a routine, waking up early, working late into the evening, and enjoying the moments in between. There was peace in the simplicity of it all. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly free. But as life has a way of doing, it threw me a curveball when I least expected it. It happened on a rainy Thursday. I was heading home from work, mindlessly scrolling through my phone as I walked down the street. The city was alive with the usual bustle, people rushing, the sound of distant car horns, and the occasional call of a street vendor. The sky was darkening, and the air smelled of rain, thick with anticipation. I rounded a corner, preparing to cross the street when something caught my eye. A figure standing under the awning of a nearby shop, staring out into the rain. The figure was familiar. Too familiar. Emily. She was standing there, her face hidden beneath the shadow of her umbrella, but I could feel her presence, unmistakable and heavy. She hadn't changed. She still carried that air of control, like she believed the world should bend to her whims. The same cold, calculating look that had been etched into my mind for so long. I stood there for a moment, frozen. Then, as if sensing my presence, Emily turned slightly, her eyes locking onto mine. There was no shock in her gaze, only recognition. It took a long time for her to speak. "I thought I'd find you here." Her voice was calm, almost clinical. I wasn't sure what to say. The years of tension between us suddenly felt like a weight, but I refused to let it crush me. "What do you want, Emily?" She stepped closer, her heels clicking on the wet pavement. "I came to talk. We have unfinished business, don't you think?" I could feel my pulse quicken. The air between us was charged, but I refused to let her dictate this moment, as she had so many times before. "I think we've had enough of unfinished business," I said, my voice steady. "I've moved on. You should too." Emily's lips twitched into something between a smile and a sneer. "You think you've moved on? You think all of this," she gestured to the city around us, "has been some kind of clean break? You haven't even scratched the surface of what I could still do." I didn't flinch. "I'm not afraid of you anymore, Emily." There was a pause, a tension so thick it almost felt tangible. Emily's eyes narrowed, studying me like a chessboard, looking for weaknesses, for cracks. But what she didn't understand was that I wasn't the same person I had been when we first met. "You know," she said finally, "I thought you'd come crawling back. You were always the weak one, the one who needed saving. But look at you now. Different. Stronger." She paused as if considering something. "It's almost disappointing." I took a step forward, my voice low. "That's the difference between you and me, Emily. I chose to be stronger. You, on the other hand, never had a choice. You've always been hiding behind manipulation and lies." Emily didn't react right away. Her eyes flickered, just for a moment, with something I couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Regret? No. It was too quickly masked by the cool facade she always wore. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice steady, but there was a hint of uncertainty now. "I'll make sure of it." And with that, she turned and walked away, disappearing, into the mist of the city as the rain started to fall harder. I stood there for a long time, watching her retreat. I wasn't sure if she was truly gone, or if this was just another chapter in the strange, tangled web that had once been my life. But I did know one thing. I wasn't going back. The quiet. After the storm. The rain washed away the remnants of that encounter, and as I continued my walk home, I felt a strange sense of closure. I had faced Emily again, and I had stood my ground. She no longer had any power over me, no control to wield. It wasn't the dramatic confrontation I had imagined all those years ago. There were no outbursts, no final explosive words exchanged. There was only a quiet, decisive end to a chapter that had haunted me for far too long. Back at my apartment, I stood by the window watching the rain continue to fall outside. I thought about everything that had led me to this point. Claire, Sophie, the betrayal, the manipulation, and the eventual realization that I had to let go. And now, as I watched the world outside, it hit me. Freedom wasn't just the absence of Emily or the end of a toxic relationship. Freedom was about embracing the unknown, about carving out your own space without anyone else defining you. Maybe I didn't know exactly what the future held, but I was finally okay with that. As I sat down at my desk, I pulled out my journal and began to write. A new story, my story, unfolding with each word. And as I wrote, I realized that the greatest victory I had won wasn't against Emily or anyone else. Days passed, each one a quiet affirmation that I was indeed moving on. I had made peace with the past, embraced the lessons learned, and started to rebuild. But life, as it always does, has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It started with a simple notification, a message. I had just finished my morning run, still sweating from the cool spring air, when I saw the alert on my phone. A message from Sophie. "I need to talk to you. It's about Emily." The words hit me like a punch in the gut. Sophie and I had been on better terms since her confrontation with Emily, but I hadn't expected this. Emily had vanished from my life, and I was beginning to think that she had finally moved on, that she was out of the picture for good. But now, Sophie was reaching out with urgency. I took a deep breath and called her back. The revelation, Sophie, picked up after the first ring, her voice strained. "You need to listen to me," she said without preamble. "Something's happened with Emily." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart racing. "I don't know exactly what's going on, but she's been acting differently. I think she's planning something, and I think it has to do with you." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean, planning something?" Sophie hesitated, as if unsure how to put it into words. "She's been reaching out to old friends, trying to get everyone on her side. She's been making these strategic moves, getting people to think you were the problem in everything that happened. And now she's coming after you again." I could hear the tension in her voice. It wasn't just a warning, it was a plea. "What do you mean, coming after me?" I asked, trying to steady my breath. "I don't know yet," Sophie replied, her voice low. "But I feel like she's not done with us. She's trying to turn people against you. She's digging up everything to ruin what you've built." I leaned against the wall, the weight of her words settling over me. Emily had always been the master manipulator, the one who knew how to pull the strings. But I thought I was done with her. I thought I had broken free of her grip. Apparently, I was wrong. The battle begins. The days that followed felt like a slow, creeping storm. I started noticing small things. People I once considered friends seemed distant, their texts and calls more sparse than before. I heard whispers of Emily's name, scattered through conversations like seeds being planted in the dirt. At first, I thought it was paranoia. Maybe I was reading too much into things, but the signs were too clear to ignore. Sophie wasn't the only one who had noticed something off. Claire, too, reached out, though her message was less of a warning and more of an apology. "I didn't realize just how deep Emily's influence went," Claire confessed. "I've been thinking about everything, and I feel terrible. I should have seen it sooner, but she used us. She used me. And now, I'm scared. I think she's trying to take everything back, take control again." I could hear the fear in her voice, but also the regret. And I realized in that moment that Emily had done more than just manipulate me. She had broken people, twisting them into something they didn't recognize, something they couldn't escape. But this time, I wasn't going to let her do it again. Sophie, Claire, and I started meeting regularly, piecing together what Emily was doing. The more we dug, the clearer the picture became. Emily wasn't just trying to manipulate me, she was trying to rebuild the empire she had lost. Only this time she had learned from her mistakes. She was quieter, more calculating, and more patient than before. But there was one thing Emily didn't understand. She didn't control me anymore. A new plan. We began making moves of our own. Sophie, Claire, and I, together this time, started. Gathering information, talking to people who had fallen under Emily's influence and had now found their way out. Slowly, we built a network, one that Emily didn't know existed. Each piece we gathered was a thread that weakened the web she had so carefully woven. I knew that to take Emily down, I had to outplay her. I couldn't just confront her head-on, not after everything that had happened. No, I had to make sure she knew, without a doubt, that I was no longer her pawn. I had to expose her to everyone she had manipulated, and more importantly, I had to show them the real Emily, the one who thrived on deception, lies, and control. It wasn't going to be easy, but I had learned one thing in the time since I had broken free of Emily. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had nothing left to lose. The final showdown. It came to a head 1 week later. We had gathered enough information, made enough of the right connections, to expose Emily for who she truly was. It wasn't just about my relationship with her anymore. It was about everyone she had hurt, everyone she had used. Sophie and Claire were with me every step of the way. The months following Emily's downfall were marked by an unexpected peace. It was as though the storm that had raged for so long had finally calmed, leaving behind a quiet calm I'd never thought possible. My relationships with Sophie and Claire had grown deeper, our bond strengthened by everything we'd endured together. We became a kind of family, one forged from the fires of manipulation, lies, and betrayal. We learned how to laugh again, how to trust again, how to embrace the future without the weight of Emily's ghost hanging over us. I had become a different person, stronger, wiser, no longer defined by my past mistakes or the people who had tried to break me. The future was full of possibility, and for the first time in a long time, I felt in control. But as the seasons changed, so too did the rhythm of my life. A lingering sense of uncertainty remained, a nagging whisper that I couldn't quite shake off. It was a feeling that something was still unfinished. The unexpected call was a Tuesday afternoon when I got the call. The number was unfamiliar, but something about it felt urgent. I hesitated for a moment, then picked up. "Hello? Is this your name?" The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but there was an unmistakable sharpness to it. A voice that carried authority, the kind of voice you'd only hear in high-stakes situations. "Yes, it is. Who's calling?" I asked, my pulse quickening. The voice paused as if evaluating how much to say. Then it continued. "My name is Detective Morgan. I'm with the City Police Department. We need to talk about Emily." I felt a jolt in my stomach, as if time had suddenly frozen. My mind immediately went to 1,000 places. What did the police want with me? Was this about her? Had she somehow found a way to cause trouble again? "Emily?" I repeated, my voice unsteady. "What about her?" "There's something you need to know. Something that has come to light recently. You may not be aware, but Emily's actions went deeper than we first realized. We've been investigating a few things that involve you." The words hung heavy in the air. What do you mean?" I asked, the question more out of instinct than understanding. "We've uncovered some disturbing evidence about Emily's involvement in criminal activities, things that you may have inadvertently been connected to. We need your cooperation to help us piece it all together." I felt my heart race. "Criminal activities? I don't understand." Detective Morgan's voice was calm, methodical. "It's not uncommon for people caught in Emily's web to be unknowingly involved in her schemes, but now we have a chance to stop everything she's built. We need you to come in for questioning." I stood frozen for a moment. Emily, it seemed, was not finished yet. Even after everything, even after the lies had been exposed, there was more to the story, things I hadn't been privy to. It was like her shadow had never really gone away. "Okay," I said, trying to steady myself. "I'll come in." The unraveling truth. I met Detective Morgan at the precinct later that evening. The office was sterile, the kind of place that felt like it belonged in a crime thriller, with its cold lighting and quiet hum of activity. The detective greeted me with a nod and led me to an interrogation room, a small, unassuming space with a single table and 2 chairs. "Have a seat," he said. I sat down, my mind racing with possibilities. What could Emily have been involved in? Had I been a pawn in a much larger game than I'd realized? Morgan took a seat across from me, his gaze steady. I'm sure you're wondering what all this is about. Emily wasn't just manipulating people emotionally. There were financial ties, underground dealings, even organized crime in play. She had a network, and we're only just beginning to unravel it. I felt my stomach drop. The idea of Emily being involved in something so far-reaching was a shock, but it made a strange kind of sense. She'd always been good at playing the long game, at pulling strings without anyone noticing. We believe you were part of a larger operation, whether you realized it or not. You were close to her, and we need your help to understand how deep this goes. There's a lot we're still trying to figure out. Detective Morgan continued. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The Emily I had known, the woman who had betrayed me, was somehow mixed up in something far more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. She wasn't just a toxic ex-girlfriend. She was a mastermind. What do you need from me? I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Just the facts, he replied. We need to know everything you can remember about her. What she did, who she associated with, anything that seems unusual. If you were ever part of something that seemed off, we need to know. The more information we have, the sooner we can take her down for good. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the situation press down on me. This wasn't just about me anymore. Even after Emily's arrest and the collapse of her criminal network, life didn't return to normal immediately. The shockwaves of her actions rippled through every corner of the city. People who had once been close to her, those who had stood by her, now found themselves caught in the fallout, questioning their own involvement, wondering how they could have missed the signs. I understood that feeling well, but as time went on, it became clear that Emily's influence hadn't only been felt through her manipulations. It had left a deeper scar on the people around her, especially those who had been closest to her, like me. Her actions hadn't just affected my relationship with her, but with the people I cared about. Sophie and Claire, while relieved that the investigation had concluded, struggled to reconcile the truth of their own involvement in Emily's web. They hadn't known the full extent of what Emily was doing, but in some ways, their relationship with her had been just as toxic. It wasn't easy for them to look back without feeling complicit. In the weeks that followed, we found ourselves in a constant state of reconstruction. We leaned on one another, supporting each other through the aftermath, but there was still something missing. A kind of silence had settled into the spaces where we used to laugh, where we had once freely talked. It wasn't until I received another unexpected call that the silence was broken. A familiar voice. It was early one evening when the phone rang. I had just finished dinner, settling into the quiet solitude of my apartment, when the caller ID lit up Claire. I hadn't expected to hear from her so late. Hey, I said, picking up, trying to sound casual. Hey, she replied, but her voice was thick with something I couldn't place. Can we meet? There's something I need to tell you. I frowned, sensing the gravity in her voice. Of course, what's going on? I can't say over the phone. Can you meet me at the usual place? The cafe? She asked, sounding distant, almost hesitant. I agreed without hesitation. I didn't know what had her so anxious, but I trusted Claire. She had been there through everything, and if she needed me, I'd be there for her. The confession, the cafe, was quiet, tucked away from the main street. It had been a favorite of ours during simpler times, before everything had changed. The small tables, the cozy atmosphere, the clink of ceramic mugs, everything about it felt familiar, even comforting. When I walked in, Claire was already there, sitting in the far corner with her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. Her face was pale, her eyes distant, lost in thought. I sat down across from her, the silence between us heavy. Claire, I started softly. What's going on? You're scaring me a little. She looked up at me, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion, and her voice trembled. I think I know why Emily came back. I blinked, confusion settling over me. What do you mean? I think she had a plan, a bigger plan than we realized. I didn't know at the time, but now it's all making sense. Emily wasn't just trying to ruin you. She wasn't just trying to manipulate me. She had something far darker in mind. Something that would have completely changed everything for us. My heart began to race. What are you talking about? Claire leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. She was never after you, not the way you thought. She was using you, yes, but she was using everyone. The connections, the alliances she made. Everything was part of a much larger scheme. And the truth is, we weren't the real targets. We were just distractions. I could feel the blood drain from my face as the pieces started to fall into place. Distractions. For what? Claire's hands clenched around her cup, as if trying to ground herself. For the money. Emily had been laundering money for years, millions of dollars, and not just through her own network. She was connected to someone bigger, someone in the shadows who we had no idea about. The authorities were barely scraping the surface. I sat back in shock. Someone bigger? Claire nodded, her eyes haunted. Yes, I think she was working for someone. I think we've only seen the tip of the iceberg, and Emily was trying to keep us from figuring it out. She had to make sure we were distracted long enough to keep everything hidden. All of those little things she did, her manipulations, the lies, the games, it was all a smokescreen to cover up the real deal. And now it's all about to come crashing down. We're not just dealing with Emily anymore, we're dealing with something far more dangerous. I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just the end of one toxic person's reign. It was the beginning of something bigger, something far darker than I'd ever imagined. The greater enemy. The next few days felt like a blur. Claire and I began to dig deeper into what she had uncovered. She was right. The authorities had been focused on Emily. The days after our discovery felt like a race against time. Claire, Sophie, and I had no idea just how deep the rabbit hole went, and yet we had no choice but to dive further. The police were doing their part, but their resources were stretched thin, and the people we were up against had been playing this game for much longer than we had. The anonymity of their power was their greatest weapon, until now. We spent sleepless nights sifting through encrypted files, trying to find anything that might link Emily's criminal dealings to the larger network we were now exposed to. Every new piece of information seemed to lead to another dead end, or worse, more questions than answers. But it wasn't just the threat of the unknown that was terrifying. It was the feeling that we were being watched. It was as if the shadows themselves were closing in on us. We received messages that were too precise to be random, too well-timed to be coincidences. Whispers started to follow us when we went out. Strangers glanced at us a little too long. The paranoia that had started as a small, nagging feeling began to take root. I knew I wasn't imagining it. One night I found a note slipped under my door. It was simple, typed in a clean font that seemed out of place in the world we were now. Living in, "You're getting too close. Stay out of it if you know what's good for you." The message was signed with a single letter. V. The name didn't ring a bell, but I could feel the weight of it. Whoever V was, they were no longer just lurking in the background. They were sending a clear message. We had crossed a line, and they were making it known that we couldn't go back. A betrayal we didn't see coming. The next turn in the story came at the most unexpected moment. Sophie had been my constant ally, the one person who always had my back. But as the pressure of the investigation mounted, something in her behavior began to shift. She had been quieter than usual, more distant. She had stopped coming to our late-night meetings, citing vague excuses about being too busy with work. At first, I chalked it up to the stress we were all under, but as the days went on, I started to worry. Then, one night, Sophie disappeared. We were supposed to meet at our usual cafe, the place where we always strategized, but when I arrived, she wasn't there. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried texting, calling, but there was nothing. The knot in my stomach grew tighter. It wasn't until the following day that I received the phone call that shattered everything. It was from an unknown number, and when I picked up, I heard Sophie's voice, distorted and frantic. "I'm sorry," she whispered, barely audible. "I didn't want you to get involved. You were right all along. They have me. I couldn't stop them. They know everything. The call abruptly ended. I stood frozen, my blood running cold. Sophie was no longer just a part of our team. She was part of the enemy. The truth behind the betrayal. The truth came slowly, piece by piece, like a puzzle that you're too late to finish. Sophie hadn't just been distant, she had been compromised. The weight of it was crushing. We had trusted her. We had fought together side by side against an enemy we hadn't fully understood. But somewhere along the way, Sophie had been turned. I knew it wasn't her fault. Not entirely. The people we were up against didn't operate like normal criminals. They played on your vulnerabilities, on your fears, on the things you loved most. They had gotten to her, just as they had once gotten to me. And now, Sophie was just another pawn in their twisted game. I felt like I was suffocating. The walls that had been closing in on us were now suffocating me with a weight I couldn't escape. But I couldn't give up, not now. I had to get Sophie back. The hidden enemy. As we dug deeper into Sophie's disappearance, we uncovered a shocking truth. V wasn't just a random figure in the shadows. It was a person who had been operating in the underworld for years. Someone with enough power and influence to manipulate entire networks without anyone realizing. Sophie's betrayal had been the result of a larger plan that had been set into motion long before any of us had ever suspected. And now, with Sophie as their captive, we were facing a dangerous ultimatum. They wanted something from me. It wasn't just about Emily anymore. The arrest of the people who had been connected to her was only the surface. Beneath it all was V, a master manipulator who had orchestrated every move, every step, every person we'd crossed. They were the ones pulling the strings. They were the ones we had to bring down. But how? With Sophie in their hands, we had no leverage. And the police couldn't act fast enough. The network we were dealing with was too vast, too insidious, for them to go after directly. Every move felt like it was playing into V's hands. But then, in a moment of clarity, I realized the one thing V had underestimated. They had underestimated me. The hours before the final confrontation felt like an eternity. Every breath I took seemed to echo in the silence of the room. Claire and I sat together in my apartment, poring over the last bits of information we had gathered. The adrenaline had long since worn off, leaving a hollow exhaustion that clung to my bones. But there was no time to rest. No time to doubt. We had made it this far, and we had no intention of stopping now. The location we had uncovered was a secluded warehouse, just outside the city. It was an old building hidden away from the main roads, and in a part of town that had long been abandoned. The perfect place for a hidden operation. It was there, we were certain, that Sophie was being held and that V was waiting for us. I checked my phone for the 100th time. There was no word from Sophie, no sign of her in the world we had fought so hard to protect. I couldn't stop wondering whether she'd turned against us fully, or if she was still in there, struggling to find a way out. Could she be using her situation to help us, to give us the upper hand? I wanted to believe that, but the truth was I didn't know. We had one chance, one opportunity to end this, to free Sophie, and to take down V. But even as I clutched the plan in my hands, I couldn't shake the nagging fear that we were walking into something far darker than we anticipated. The walk into darkness. It was nearing midnight when we made our move. Claire, Sophie's last known ally, and I drove to the warehouse, the tension palpable in the air between us. The city lights faded the further we drove, and soon we were surrounded by the harsh shadows of the industrial district. My heart pounded, in my chest with every passing mile, but I didn't let it show. When we arrived, we parked a few blocks away, out of sight. The warehouse loomed in front of us, its windows boarded up, the air thick with the scent of decay and oil. There was no sign of life from the outside, no guards, no movement, nothing that indicated this place was anything more than a forgotten building. But I knew better than to trust appearances. We made our way quietly toward the entrance where the faded metal door stood ajar. I motioned for Claire to follow me, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. As we approached, I held my breath, scanning the darkened area for any signs of life. Nothing. The world seemed unnervingly still. I pushed the door open, my senses on high alert. Inside, the air was thick and musty, the floor covered with dust and debris. The shadows clung to every corner, creating the illusion of movement where there was none. I looked to Claire, who gave me a quick, silent nod. We were in this together, no matter what happened next. We crept forward, the sound of our footsteps barely audible against the silence, and then, from the darkness, a voice echoed. I was wondering when you'd show up. The face of the enemy. I froze. The voice was cold, sharp, like a knife cutting through the air. It sent a chill down my spine, but I refused to let fear take over. The shadow ahead of us shifted, and then, out of the darkness, stepped a figure. The figure was tall, their face obscured by the shadows. But even in the dim light, I could make out their posture, the way they stood with absolute confidence, as if they were the one in control. My breath caught in my throat. This was it, the person who had orchestrated everything. The mastermind. Behind Emily's manipulation, behind Sophie's betrayal, behind all of it. I'm impressed, V continued, their voice dripping with mock admiration. I didn't think you'd get this far. But then again, you've always had a knack for surviving, haven't you? I clenched my fists, trying to steady myself. Where is Sophie? I demanded, my voice steady but laced with fury. Laughed softly, a sound that sent a shiver through me. Sophie? Oh, she's right where she belongs. I felt a rush of panic. What do you mean? Don't worry, V said, stepping closer into the light, their face finally visible. It was a face I didn't recognize, but one that was unmistakably cold. Sharp features, calculating eyes, a look of someone who had seen far too much. You'll see her soon enough. But first, let me explain a few things. I took a step forward, my pulse quickening. I don't need explanations. I just want Sophie. V tilted their head, the glint of amusement in their eyes making my blood boil. Oh, but you do need explanations. You see, everything that's happened, Emily, Sophie, all of this, was never about you. It was never about her either. It was about control, power, a game. And in the end, you were always just pawns. I took another step forward, my voice low with rage. If we were pawns, then what does that make you? V smiled, a cold, calculating smile that seemed to stretch too wide. A king, of course. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. V wasn't just a criminal mastermind. They were a part of something far larger than anything I had imagined. The door creaked open slowly, and a chill ran down my spine as I stepped inside. The room was dimly lit by a single hanging bulb that flickered intermittently. The walls were bare, save for a few rusted pipes running along the ceiling. The floor was cold and unwelcoming, stained by the years of neglect the building had suffered. But none of that mattered. My focus was singular. Sophie. I scanned the room quickly, and there in the far corner, chained to a metal chair, was Sophie. Her face was pale, her hair matted against her skin, but her eyes, those eyes, were the same. She looked up at us as we entered, her expression unreadable. "Sophie!" I rushed toward her, but Claire held me back with a hand on my arm. "Wait," she whispered urgently, her eyes darting around the room. "It's too quiet. Something's not right." I froze. The air seemed to grow heavier, thicker, with the kind of tension that precedes disaster. Claire's instincts had always been sharp, and now I could feel the weight of her warning. "You don't think—" I started to ask, but before I could finish, the door behind us slammed shut with a deafening crash. I spun around, but there was no one there. The room was still, save for the faint hum of the flickering bulb. My heart raced. "Sophie?" I called out, but her gaze remained fixed on the floor. "Don't trust her." Sophie's voice was barely a whisper, the words strained as if they pained her to speak. I didn't understand. What was she saying? But before I could ask more, a sharp click echoed in the room, and a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was V. "Did you really think this was going to be that easy?" V's voice was calm, almost amused, like they were watching a play unfold. I took a step forward, anger burning in my chest. "You've had us chasing shadows from the beginning." I spat, my voice thick with frustration. "Who the hell are you, really?" V tilted their head, as though genuinely curious about my question. "You still don't get it, do you?" They stepped closer, a predatory smile curling their lips. "You think you're here for Sophie. You think this is about Emily or betrayal or whatever else you've been spinning in your head, but it's not. You're just part of a much larger game." I took another step forward, my voice steady but laced with anger. "What game?" "The game of control." V's words hit like a slap. "You've been chasing false leads, believing you're uncovering the truth. But every step you've taken, every move you've made, has been part of my design." The realization hit like a cold, hard wave. This wasn't just about Sophie, this wasn't even about me. It was all part of their plan. I felt a flicker of understanding. "You've been using us. All of us." V's smile widened. "Exactly. You see, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose. What matters is who controls the board. And right now, that's me." Sophie shifted slightly. In her chair, her chains rattling softly. Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw something. A flicker of recognition. She wasn't fully gone. Not yet. There was still a part of her trying to fight back. I turned to her, desperation creeping into my voice. "Sophie, tell me what to do. What can we do to end this?" But Sophie's voice was hollow when it came. "You can't. It's too late. It's all been set in motion. You don't have the power to stop it." I felt a surge of helplessness, but I refused to let it control me. I couldn't afford to fall apart now. Sophie was still in there. I had to believe that. "You're wrong," I said firmly, looking at V. "I may not have all the answers, but I'm not backing down. We'll stop you one way or another." V's expression darkened, their face hardening into something colder, more dangerous. "You really think you can stop me?" Their voice dropped to a low growl. "You're already too deep in. There's no way out for you, no way out for any of us. The pieces are already in place." I didn't understand what they meant, but I felt it. The growing tension in the air, the sense that the walls were closing in around us. Without warning, a loud bang echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. I whirled around, but before I could react, I heard the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps, the unmistakable sound of a threat approaching. A small team of figures emerged from the shadows, people wearing masks, their bodies concealed in dark clothing. They fanned out around the room, cutting off any escape route. The situation had escalated, and we were completely surrounded. "You're out of options," V said quietly, their gaze fixed on me with a predatory glint. "You've already lost. Now it's time to pay the price." The room seemed to close in, and I could feel the panic rising in my chest. How had things gone so wrong? How had I let it all slip away? "Sophie, you have to fight," I called, out, hoping for some sign of resistance, some flicker of the person I knew. But Sophie's eyes were distant, blank, and yet, as the men circled us, the room seemed to freeze for a moment as Sophie's figure stood tall, knife gripped firmly in her hand. For the first time since we'd arrived, there was no doubt in her eyes, no hesitation. She wasn't the broken woman I had seen when we entered. She was focused, determined, and there was a fire in her that I hadn't witnessed before. V's confident demeanor faltered just slightly, but the smile remained, twisted and dark. "You think you can stop me, Sophie?" V sneered, eyes gleaming with a mix of amusement and contempt. "You were never more than a tool, just like him, a pawn." But Sophie didn't flinch. Her voice was steady, colder than I had ever heard. "Not anymore." Without warning, she moved. In one swift motion, Sophie lunged at V, her eyes locked onto their target. The room erupted into chaos. I had no time to think, no time to hesitate. I turned toward the masked men still trying to regroup. Claire was right beside me, her movements fluid, efficient. We fought side by side, dispatching the figures one by one. But my focus was still on Sophie and V, the two forces locked in a deadly standoff. Sophie. She was fighting for her life, for her freedom, and for something deeper, something more important than I could fully understand in that moment. The battle between them. Sophie closed the distance, her knife flashing in the dim light. V raised their hand as if prepared for the strike, but Sophie was quicker. With a precision that surprised even me, Sophie forced V back, knocking their hand away. The two clashed like titans, a violent dance of movement and desperation. "You don't understand," V growled through clenched teeth as they struggled to keep their footing. "This was never about you. You were never meant to win." Sophie's eyes burned with intensity. "Then why are you losing?" she shot back, slashing at V's defenses with deadly accuracy. The fight was brutal. Every strike, every movement, felt like the culmination of everything we had been through. The lies, the manipulation, the pain. Sophie's every action was filled with raw emotion, the years of suffering she had endured, the anguish of being used and betrayed, all coming to a head. I could feel my pulse quicken as I continued fighting the remaining men, making sure none of them could intervene. But all I wanted to do was reach Sophie, to help her, to see her free from V's grip forever. And then it happened. Sophie saw her opening. V had miscalculated, their defenses weakening. In a final explosive motion, Sophie drove the knife forward, striking V across their chest. The figure gasped, stumbling back as their face twisted in shock and pain. "This is over," Sophie said, voice ragged but filled with a fierce triumph. Collapsed to the ground, their hand clutching at the wound, eyes wide in disbelief. "You can't," they whispered, their voice faltering. But Sophie stood tall, a quiet, powerful silence filling the space between us. She had won. She had taken back control. The aftermath. The masked men had been subdued, their bodies scattered around the room, incapacitated but alive. The adrenaline that had fueled the fight began to ebb away, and with it, the crushing weight of everything we had been through. I approached Sophie carefully, my heart racing with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. She looked at me, her gaze softening for the first time since we entered the warehouse. But there was something else in her eyes, something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't just victory, it was liberation. You did it, I whispered, stepping closer. Sophie's lips curled into a small, weary smile. We did it. Claire walked over, breathless but triumphant. You really did it, she said, her voice filled with awe. Sophie's expression grew serious, and she turned to face V, who was now lying motionless on the floor. This is just one battle, she said, her voice firm. But there's so much more to undo, so much damage done. I nodded, understanding what she meant. This was the beginning of a long road, not just for us, but for everyone V had ensnared. We had won this fight, but we hadn't won the war. But at least we had control over our lives again. At least we were free. Sophie's eyes met mine once, more. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't know who I was anymore, but now I know. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. You don't need to apologize. You fought your way back. That's all that matters. Sophie smiled, the first real smile I had seen in what felt like ages. And in that moment I knew, no matter what came next, no matter how dark things got, we would face it together. We had taken back our lives. We had taken back our futures. And V? They were no longer a threat. The mastermind who had orchestrated everything was finally gone, their plans shattered. The pieces of the game had fallen apart. But for us, the journey wasn't over. It was just beginning.